Good morning. Glad you decided to brave the elements and come. And if you're visiting today, or if you're investigating Christianity, I just want you to know that we welcome you to do that here. And if you have your kids in here and they make some noise, that's okay too. I grew up in a church of 85 that now is about 450, and so I feel right at home in that kind of a setting. And also, I just want you to know that God is here. God is here. He manifests himself to us with his Spirit, and he is here. Well, a couple rows back here know that I'm not very mechanically inclined. In fact, I can make nothing work. So I'm really glad God cooperated with me today, because a few weeks ago, there was a snowstorm, and I got all bundled up, got these snow pants in my coat and the gloves, and I go out to my new Toro snowblower. All right, and it's only been used like 2-3 times. And on my way out, Susan's on the other end of the house, and I'm in the garage. I'm getting ready to shut that door, and I said, "Hey, Susan, did you put oil in the gas?" It's one of those 2-cycle motors, you know, that I sound like I've been around cars my whole life. I know nothing about this stuff, but it sounds like I know. It's a 2-cycle motor, you know, where you mix the oil and the gas. So anyway, you ever ask your spouse a question and she answers it? It's a yes-no question, and she answers it with yes or no, but then qualifies that answer with something that seems to be the opposite of what she said. Well, that's what happened, and I said, "Did you put oil in the gas?" And I thought she said, you know, yes, it needs oil. I got to admit, from out there in the garage, it was a little bit like the teacher on Charlie Brown. So I'm dangerously left to my own interpretations. So I think it needs oil, okay? So I go out there and I top it off with gas. At the same time, there was this nice bottle of new oil in there. And I'm thinking back to what the snowblower man told me when he delivered it, and I could have swore he said a bottle to every tank of gas. Okay, but this bottle's a little bigger than the bottles that I had before. So, you know, I dump that in there, you know, and dump it on, get every last drop, tighten it up, you know, get it all going, turn the switch on. I got an electric starter, so I do that because I don't want to do that wimpy thing. So anyway, and I press that button, you know, and then I press the start, and all of a sudden, you know, wah, 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 you know, I undo it, and if I mention, my friends know I'm not very mechanically inclined. So anyway, you know, I get it out there, and never seen that black smoke before. And I mean, it just roars, man, it goes for about 8 feet, and it stops. And I thought, no problem, it needs more oil. So I go and I try to find more oil, and I'm looking for another bottle, and we're out. And you know, by the way, which camera's on? The guys at Harmony Equipment in Auburn, Indiana are so wonderful. You too should buy a snowblower from them. Call 1-800-555-1212. There, now I don't have to pay for the repairs. But anyway, my snowblower wouldn't go. My snowblower just wouldn't go. I tried and I tried and I tried. And it just would not run. And you know what? That snowblower is a lot like saving faith. A lot like the verses we continue to see here on the screen before we start this series each day on James. Many of us just turn the switch on, and that would be our mind, that on-off switch that I turned on to start the snowblower, and we believe that God exists. Some of us move forward a little bit more, and we get our starter going. You know, that's our emotions turning over to generate conviction. But for some of us, that's where it ends. God's idea of real, complete faith is that our engine, our will, actually kicks in so that our belief, our faith has real action, real deeds, so our faith works. And I just want to ask you, in this stormy life, where on the line of progression is your faith? In this stormy life, because that's when we need snowblowers, right, after the storms come? In this stormy life, where on the line of progression is your faith? Does your faith work really? Is your faith complete? If you want to open your Bibles to James 2:14 through 26, I just want to tell you a couple backdrops here. First of, I don't think we've mentioned that James, the book of James, parallels the Sermon on the Mount. tremendous amount of parallels of Jesus' sermon, probably the greatest speech, I think, undoubtedly, the greatest speech ever given, recorded in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Tremendous parallels of James, the half-brother of Jesus, to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' speech there to about 20,000. Second is, when James or any of the New Testament writers would write a letter and it would go to a local church, which was a house church, and they'd circulate it, it would go around, and that house church, each house church would have like 12 people, maybe 20, and seekers would actually come and watch in the background for like 2 years before they got in. And here's what they did with the letter. They read it in its entirety during times of worship. So we miss a little bit if you don't think back to everything we've taught on up until this point. So they would read it in its entirety. And so I just want to remind you that the background, remember, James starts out with a reminder of Jesus' statement in John 16:33, in this life you will have trouble. And James starts out talking about, in this life you're going to have trouble, so consider it all joy. I want to give you one more background. I want you to look at verse 2:13, the verse immediately preceding our passage today. And it talks about mercy and judgment. Because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount said, blessed are the merciful. Blessed, abundantly happy, and fully made adequate are the merciful. And he also said in the Sermon on the Mount, don't judge, don't condemn. So our first section here is James 2:14 through 17. And I think James gives us a real clear picture of the mind, of that switch, of that on-off switch on my snowblower, and that's mental assent. So let's just read that together. Verses 14 through 17, coming on the screen. What good is it? What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? And then verse 17, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. I want to point out something in verse 14. NIV, I want to make sure, I've read so many different translations on this. NIV says such faith. Such faith. That is really key to understand this entire passage, is that he's saying there in verse 14, such faith. That kind of definition of faith. You know, Martin Luther said, he was the lead reformer there in 1517, and he said, faith alone, grace alone, only the Bible, only the Scriptures. And he said this about this passage, man is justified by faith alone, but not by faith that is alone. Not by faith that is alone. And he goes on there, James does in 15, and he talks about physical needs. You know, he saw Jesus, and Jesus talked about this in the Sermon on the Mount. He would meet physical needs. Jesus would be the salt and teach others to do the same so they could be the light. Almost every context of Jesus speaking the gospel, speaking about life with Christ, he has already met a physical need. He's already met a physical need, and so people listen. And then in verse 17, I just want to be clear there about deeds. Deeds, the Greek word is erga. It's where we get the word ergonomics. It's like work, okay? Deeds there are not works of the law. They're deeds of mercy, verse 13. They're deeds of mercy. So now it's starting to make sense. Faith without mercy, you know, it's not faith. Mental assent alone, no. Hebrews 11:1 is one of my favorite verses because it defines faith. The substance, King James is so good here compared to others because the others have a tendency to make it be sort of not tangible. But this faith is founded on fact. Listen to this, Hebrews 11:1. The substance, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Substance. And it's the evidence, the absolute evidence of things not seen. Faith is confident assurance in truth. It's trust. It's a commitment. Believe and faith are the same word in Greek. Believe is the verb and faith is the noun. The Greek word is pistos. In Matthew 5:16 in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, let your light shine, let your love shine, let your mercy shine, let your face shine before men, that they may see your good deeds, your deeds of mercy. Erwin McManus is a pastor of a church in Los Angeles called Mosaic. and he's written a couple books that are just out, and they're wonderful. I encourage you to read them. And on one of those, he shares a story. And he said he was speaking at a singles engagement, and there were thousands of singles there, and it was on a beach, and he had his 10-year-old son with him, and there was a break, and they all were going to the beach. And he said he went to the beach, and he noticed this double amputee trying to get out of the water, and he had crutches. And he said, immediately, I knew if I turned to my right, it wouldn't look like I saw him. So he turns to the right, and and as he's turning, he sees him go down.